Hello, all of you beautiful, beautiful, wonderful, hardworking, glorious people. My name is Tyler Richardson, and welcome to another episode of How to Survive Working for God. And I hope that things are going well for you in your ministry. I know that there are so many ups and downs that come across our lives in ministry in one case or another. And sometimes we are doing good and the ministry is in a tough spot, or sometimes the ministry seems to be doing very well and we are in a tough spot and we are barely ever on the same page. And I just want to encourage you wherever you are in your journey. I say this a lot, but whether you're paid, volunteer, part-time, full-time, bivocational, whatever the case is, whether you've just started or whether you've been plowing for 40, 50, 60 years, I want to encourage you that God is on your side in what you're doing. And there is a way to do ministry happy, healthy, and whole, not falling apart, angry, and on the edge of quitting to become a real estate agent every 30 days. There's a life where you have the ability and God has the grace for you to walk in, to be happy, healthy, and whole in ministry. And I'm hoping and praying that these conversations and these moments that we have together, even though they are short, every week, that just gives us a little bit of an opportunity to exhale with all of the things that are on our shoulders, but also after we exhale, breathe in fresh hope, fresh perspective, fresh insight, fresh energy for moving ahead in doing what we feel like God has called us to do in whatever capacity or arena that may look like: worship, preaching, social media, so on and so forth. So what we're going to talk about today specifically is we're going to talk about light switches. And light switches, to me, for the duration of this episode, when I'm talking about light switches, what I'm talking about is something that is super practical. I basically break it down like this. If you walk into a room and the lights aren't on, you walk into the room, you flip the switch, you get what you need to get or do whatever it is that you need to do in the room, and then you walk out. And most of you, as you are walking out, you will flip the switch again and the light will go off. The light and the light switch serve a certain purpose when you walk in the room, and when you walk out of the room, that purpose is done. And the purpose of the light being on is to help, obviously, illuminate whatever it is that you're doing. Maybe you're looking for a jacket. Maybe you are uh, looking for some documents. Whatever the case may be of wherever you're in the room, the light helps give you the ability to do it with clarity, with illuminated clarity, if you will. But what we talk about when I'm saying specifically light switches is it's not just the light itself, it's you turning the light on and off. Now, if you walked into a room that was dark and you couldn't see, you wouldn't pray and go, God, what should I do? I can't see in here. I can't find my jacket. I know it's in here, and I guess I could just feel around, but I'm having a really hard time finding my jacket. God, can you supernaturally put this jacket in my hands because I'm running late? I've got stuff to do. I really need this jacket. You don't do that. You don't pray at all, more than likely. What you do is you go straight to the light switch, you turn it on. Or if it's a room you're unfamiliar with, you look for a light switch. Then once you find it, then you turn it on. But at no point do you make the light switch a spiritual expression or decision. It is a practical matter that has to be done to help illuminate clarity on what it is that you are doing in that moment. In ministry, there are practical things and then there are spiritual things. There are things that require prayer, they require fasting, that require wisdom, insight, knowledge, a multitude of counsel. There are so many things that require us to have a very specific approach to it. I think that is all amazing and wonderful, needed, and I want to make sure we do that to the best of our abilities. I also want to add to the discussion and to even your own tool belt of how you approach and operate in ministry, an ability to strengthen the practical matters of ministry that do not require a spiritual approach. Now, I know when we talk about ministry, it's very hard to talk about ministry not having a spiritual approach, because everything in some capacity in ministry is spiritual. I mean, that you were probably felt like you were called to ministry. Your ministry probably involves some capacity of spiritual enlightenment, whether it be through scripture or prayer or leading people in worship or whatever the case may be, or wherever you may fall. And so, since there's so much spirituality involved, a lot of emotions can be involved. And I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing. But if we're looking at everything through a spiritual lens, I think what can happen is we get hurt, we get fragile, we get disillusioned, we get hurt by things because we never turn the spiritual lens off to look at certain things as a practical matter instead of a spiritual matter. And this is one of my favorite examples of this. If you are a worship leader and you have a microphone and the microphone's batteries die and you are leading worship and you're in the middle of your song, God is moving, the people are engaged, it's a great day, and you're leading worship, and then all of a sudden the batteries go out. And many of us, if not all of us, have been in a service where something like this has happened. It kind of sparks an awkwardness in the room, and everybody kind of feels like, whoa, left field distraction just kind of came in hot. And now even the people that were engaged and not paying any attention to the worship leader on the platform, now they are, eyeballing them and like, okay, who's going to fix this? How long is this going to last? Are they going to mention it? Are they going to make it a joke? Or is somebody going to run from production and give them a new mic or what? And it's just like a distraction awkwardness that sometimes only lasts like a minute, but that minute can feel like 10 to 15 minutes. And if you're on stage and the worship leader specifically, it can probably feel more like 20 minutes. And when we are in that moment where the microphone's batteries have died, what we don't need to do in that moment is pray for the microphone. We don't need to pray for a supernatural infilling of power into these batteries. What we need to do is we need to either get a new microphone or we need to change the batteries in this microphone. Now, whether you have a tech team or production team, or whether you are the tech team, production team, pastor, and worship leader all in one, whatever the case is, we all agree praying for that microphone is very sweet and very nice conceptually, but that's not what's needed in that moment. What's needed in that moment is a practical approach that we have to change these batteries. Now, if I'm in a service and somebody is leading worship and the battery dies, sure, it's awkward for, 30, 45 seconds while they figure out a new microphone, and then they get a new microphone, everything's fixed, they move on, we all move on collectively. But if the worship leader decides to basically halt everything and makes us all collectively try and pray with them for this microphone, what was just a very short, not a big deal, awkward moment of distraction turns into something that is way beyond distraction, way beyond awkwardness. It now turns into something where I'm like, we need to bring the pastor out because I feel like worship is now over, because this has been so over dramatized that now I don't know if we can just slide back into the song or slide back into this moment. And that is a reaction and a response to trying to make a practical approach, a spiritual approach. A spiritual approach will bring out additional frustration. It will bring about additional distraction. It will bring out additional nuances that are not necessarily on paper harmful, but they are obstacles. They're obstacles in your thinking. They're obstacles in your relationships. They're obstacles in your trust in your leadership. It creates an obstacle and a barrier that's very hard to get over. And what it can do is it can make something that's not offensive all of a sudden feel very offensive. And now I have seen, over the years, over and over and over again, where people will say, I have prayed about a song set and I want to lead worship with these specific songs. And then either they talk to the pastor, or the pastor talks to them, or there's some kind of conversation that happens with a speaker at a youth camp or conference, whatever the case. And in that conversation, they're like, oh, could you do like this song? Do you know this song? I would love to end my sermon with this song, even if it's just like a chorus. I've seen over and over again a disconnect between the worship leader and the worship band. And there's this feeling of, oh, you don't trust us. You don't trust our spiritual abilities. You don't trust that we've prayed about making this set. You don't trust us that we hear God. You don't trust us. You're trying to be a control freak. You're trying to manipulate our emotions in this moment. You're trying to like dominate the room. And if it's not your way, it's the highway, and so on and so forth. Now, some of that stuff may be true, but it's not always true. It's probably not even as true as often as we think or feel like it is. But for the sake of this conversation, if that is not true, what is making the friction worse and what's causing more obstacles and division between worship teams and the pastor is that we are practically ignoring something, and instead of approaching it practically, we are approaching it spiritually. And to me, a situation where a pastor comes and says, hey, I would really love for this song to be sung at altar. I really feel like it sums up everything I'm talking about. I feel like it would just bring like a lot of unity in the room. To me, that is a light switch. That's something that I don't need to pray to see if I agree with my leader. No, if my leader asks that, then that's what we're doing. Now, if my leader comes to me a week before and says, hey, I'm thinking of like 2 to 3 songs that I think would be a really good altar call moment, or a really good just kind of reflection on the scriptures. Here's 2 to 3 songs I'm feeling. What do you think we should do? And then the pastor involves the worship leader or involves the worship team. And maybe their response to the pastor is, oh, I think this song could really work. This song actually is probably more on the nose with what you're talking about. But this song right here, every time we lead this song in worship, the crowd just leans in. The congregation is fully on board. So even though this one may be a better fit, this one may be better if you're really wanting unity. But if you're not really wanting the unity so much to create a moment, but you're wanting more of like actually reflecting, that even though this song isn't as familiar, maybe this one would be better. Like, are you starting to realize that now, even though it's practical, there's a spiritual approach? Because then it's a little bit more of you're engaging your heart and your soul in the decision of, God, what are you doing in this moment? You're even like, can we take a day and pray about it? Can let's run it in rehearsal, in a midweek rehearsal, and then we'll let you know which one kind of feels the best. And then they reach out to the pastor and be like, honestly, I feel like you can choose. We'll do whichever one you want. Or maybe they're like, we ran it, and honestly, this one, like everybody in the room was looking at each other like, well, like I feel the presence of God on this song. I think this is the one we should do. See, even though it's a practical decision that has to be made, you can include and intentionally draw upon a spiritual approach that brings unity. But if you try to make a practical approach a spiritual approach when it should be just practical, what happens is you actually you fractionalize and create obstacles in the unity. But if you properly understand which is practical and which is spiritual, it actually grows the unity. Does that make sense? So instead of people having to walk on eggshells because people are being overly emotionally attached to certain things because they feel like a practical decision is a spiritual statement. So if the pastor says, I know you wanted to do this song, but I really want to do this song, he's making a practical decision. But if you have a filter of everything being spiritual, then what ends up happening is you now take it as a spiritual statement of you not being spiritual, you not knowing what you're doing, you not loving God, you not understanding how to be a worship leader. And the pastor never said any of that. Now, if the pastor feels that way, then you and the pastor obviously need to have a conversation. But what can happen is we fractionalize, and there's a divide and an obstacle that happens between our unity because we translate practical decisions through spiritual lenses when we shouldn't. And then those spiritual statements that we have translated, even though they've never been said, turns into a lot of weight that we carry. Where then 6 months later, 9 months later, a year later, 5 years later, you have a blow up and it's, you've never trusted me. You've never been on my team. You've never backed me up. You've never this. And it escalates and it avalanches into something where it never needed to be because it needed to be a practical approach. So I want to invite you to maybe make a list of what is a microphone problem, what is not a microphone problem. And when I say a microphone problem or not a microphone problem, what I mean is, what is a microphone problem that requires batteries? It is a no nonsense. We don't even need to have a meeting about this. I know that this is supremely practical. A battery going into a microphone is a practical situation. Very easy, very cut and dry. Another situation, though, that would not be a microphone problem is something about the voice that is speaking or singing on that microphone. So that could be something of like heart posture, the unity of a team. If you're having an arrogance issue with a worship leader, or if you feel like you can only sing the song that you feel like you connect with God on, and if you don't connect with God on it, you're not interested in leading it, even though it's been requested, or something along that line. Or if you if you preach on a microphone and you belittle people in a staff meeting, that the voice that's going into the microphone is a spiritual matter. The practical matter is making sure that there are batteries in the microphone so the voice can be heard and properly given in a way that it can reach the people in a powerful way. Does that make sense? Now, sometimes there are batteries in microphone scenarios where it's like, this is obvious, loud and clear. Then there are things that are not a microphone issue that are talking about the voice. That could be character, that could be integrity, that could be praying that, God, what song should we do? We want you to be as in charge of helping us make this set as possible. I'm going to trust that you're ordering my steps and orchestrating and articulating what is our people in this church need to hear, and so on and so forth. There are some things that fall a little in the middle. And I don't want to ignore that. I understand that sometimes you run into a situation that you're not entirely sure which it is. And I would like you to make a third list where you write down those things. I think you will be surprised how easy it will be primarily to write down the things that are practical that maybe you've been making spiritual. And then you'll probably be able to write some of the things that are spiritual because some of them are kind of self-evident, a little bit more obvious. The ones that are in the middle will probably be the trickiest because you may have one or two examples, but you probably won't have beyond that. So I wouldn't be intimidated one way or another when you're making the list. Don't freak out that you have one, pillar that has 100 examples and one that has 2 examples. I think a lot of it is helpful because for you and everybody else on your team, it's very helpful to also compare these lists because then you can see, oh, wow, we're all on the same page here. We're golden. Oh, half of us are on one side of the fence with this issue and the other half are on the other side of the fence. Half of us think this is practical. Half of us think this is spiritual. What do we do? I think you should have a conversation and be like, why do you think it's practical? And then the other side of the room, why do you think it's spiritual? And then I would just have a dialogue and be like, okay, how can we get closer to unity on this? I'm a big believer in how do we get to a place of unity at all times, if at all possible. And I think it presents you an opportunity to not have one side of the room bully the other side of the room into submission. So that way you can have your way and make something practical that you didn't want to make spiritual. Because maybe it is something that is in the middle and it's not necessarily going to be as definitive for you or for the team or for the staff. I don't think there's a problem there, but I do think it turns into a situation. You're like, okay, now what we need to do is we need to turn the communication knob all the way up. So we need to be in a situation, if you feel like a topic is spiritual and I feel like a topic is practical, then what I need to do while we're figuring out how to agree in the middle, I need to make sure that when I'm approaching it practically, I'm not being short with you because you are approaching it spiritually. So I need to take consideration, even though I may not even be the main leader, but I can be the leader of myself and the leader of the room in my capacity to step up and say, hey, I'm going to approach this lightly. I'm going to make sure that I say things like, does that make sense? Are we okay with that? Does that sound good? Do you have any questions? I'm going to let the door be wide open for communication so the person who's approaching it spiritually feels like they have an advocate for them. So that way, if their feelings are hurt, or that way, if they feel like they're misunderstood, they feel like there is a place to have communication as opposed to, well, I think it's practical, so I'm not going to baby you or have any conversations with you about this because as far as I'm concerned, it's practical. You need to grow up. That's not a way to have team unity. That's not a way to have unity as a staff. That's not a way to have healthy culture. That's not a way to move forward and build together in a way that God would be glorified. So I know that's not necessarily the easiest thing, but I think what you will be surprised to find out is that the more you do it, the easier it is to do. It's not necessarily a muscle that takes you 6 months and then all of a sudden it is easy peasy, but it is something where it's like, oh wow, if I just kind of calm down and take an extra 5 seconds in how I approach this, ask 1 to 3 questions, like one-liner questions to make sure everybody feels good and everybody's on the same page, then you will see a ripple effect that is not just little by little, but mountain by mountain. It will be astronomically noticeable. And there's something about a team that gives space for one another to have a voice about things that aren't that important. Now, I know sometimes people want to talk about things that aren't important to a point that it feels like you're wasting time. I'm not talking about that. But I am talking about giving somebody a 30-second window of an opinion that you give integrity to. That is a huge deal. And all it can take is 30 seconds, 2 minutes of somebody being like, yeah, this is why I feel like this is a spiritual matter. And I don't want to approach it in like a cold, practical way. You're like, okay, could you in like 30 seconds to 90 seconds tell me why you feel that way? Then they feel heard, even though maybe they don't get to say everything they want to say because you only gave them like a 90-second window. But you now are in touch with the reality of their feelings, and you're also available to have your own feelings adjust. And you have also created an opportunity for team unity, not just in the group as a whole, but in you and that individual. And maybe for all that you know, not only will you be able to replicate that with another person on your team, but you'll also create an opportunity in the person you've had that moment of communication with where they can go and do the same thing with somebody else. So maybe you were practical and they were spiritual, and then you handle a conversation about that, and then they go on, and then maybe all of a sudden now they don't see something as spiritual, they see it as practical, and now they have to be the one to have that communication. You have exemplified for them the way to do that in a healthy, holy way. And I think that will make all of the difference in the world. Um, Thank you so much again for joining us today. We have so many things in the description. We have a book, we have resources, we have staff and team trainings, we have courses, we have all kinds of stuff. Feel free to go through it. And codes for free trials and all that good stuff. But I just wanted to encourage you to start looking for some light switches and cut yourself some slack in some of your decision making and do the same for your team. And I think everybody will be a lot happier for it, because when we let light switches just be light switches, then it gives us the opportunity to spiritually approach the things that need our spiritual attention. And that will help add health to us individually and all together corporately. In Jesus' name. Talk to you soon.